I'm Earl. I'm one of the pastors here at 360. Welcome to our beta version this summer. If you've been with us for a while, you know we spent about a year meeting at a hotel, building up a core group, voila, in hopes of moving to a larger venue to do something more, which is this place. The downside of that was we inherited a kind of a shell, and so we're about a third of the way through a 90-day home makeover project. So what we have going on here is 360 reality show. Basically, except there's no big van with the reveal at the end. It's all on us to get everything done. So new chairs are coming, and we're going to put the projector in the ceiling like we're cool and all these things are going to happen up till our grand opening on August the 28th, where we'll finally go on Broadway and sort of invite downtown and the campus to be part of our life here, which would be very exciting. I tell the team all the time, we're like a mountain climbing team that had a really long walk to the hill. So we haven't even really started climbing yet. This is just the walk to the hill. We're not even at base camp. We're not even ready to assault the summit. Just the walk to the hill. Now when I say that, they go, ah, but they're such good people. They just keep walking. So we're all sort of, we're tied together at the waist like a mountain climbing group would be, so we just sort of pull each other along. And this is our current project. Locations count a whole lot in our city. Berkeley's very event driven, so to have a location where you can do stuff, and you have spaces you can use to serve your community and your campus, that's been a huge thing for us, so we're real excited about that. And that explains, as Jan pointed out, the many post-it notes you'll see in the glass in the back, which is our system for organizing this project. Someone said project management software the other day. We have post-it notes. Why would we need a computer? Next project, we're definitely going the software route, though, I can guarantee you. We've used most of the post-it notes available in the Western world, and so now we kind of need another plan. I came out of my house the other day, headed for the Y. People ask me, when you go to the Y, do you get a runner's high from weights and treadmill? Do you love it? Does it expand your consciousness? And I tell them, just stop speaking. Because it's painful and boring. And at my age, exercise, you're just fighting for your life. It's not about anything else anymore. You're fighting for your life. It's a desperate, sort of rat in a shoebox kind of an experience for me, but I do it because it's the law. And so I went to Marshall's and I bought what was on sale for exercise gear. So I have this black windbreaker, which you have to have here in the winter because it rains all over you when you're walking wide, and these black exercise pants of two different brands that don't really go together. They're different textures, but when you put them together, they look like kind of like a black running suit. So I'm headed out of the car, jumping into the Mazda because Jan's got her old Volvo somewhere else. And I've got my $5 aviator sunglasses on from Nordstrom's Rack, the Body Glove brand. And across the street, I hear my neighbor talking loudly, which is not an unusual occurrence in my neighborhood. And it's, Earl, wait, because you can see him about to drive away. And as I look up, I didn't see him at first, and then he's sprinting across the street toward me as I'm standing inside the door of my car talking to my other friend, Bruce, who lives a couple of doors down, and he's running towards me, Earl, and just hiking across the street, and he arrives in front of my car, and he said, I saw you from over there, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, is that Earl? And we'll show you by way of video magic what he was looking at when he ran up to the car by way of the miracle of digital projection technology. And as my friend runs up to the car, here am I. He says, Earl, I can't believe it was you. You look like a gangster. Now, I probably look like a lot of things, but I don't really feel that gangster is on the list. And I don't think anyone else would believe that. But he was totally sold on this idea. So this is what high-end drug dealers look like in my part of Berkeley. You wear a mismatched black exercise suit and cheap aviator sunglasses, and you drive a 12-year-old Japanese car with 200,000 miles on it. Crime does not pay. It's true. If that's what it's about, if this is it, if this is gangster land, I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen. And what my friend taught me out there on the street in South Berkeley was that sometimes the way you think you come across to people isn't what they see in you. And you can be very obvious. This is what I wear to go and run on the treadmill and lift a few weights. But to my friend running across the street, it's the exact opposite. Man, that is gang banger gear. Now, it's on a white man who's almost 60 years old, but you are a gangster in my book. And as we arrive here in downtown Berkeley, close to the Cal campus, both of which we love very much, I think the same thing is very likely to happen to us, that what we are that's obvious to us as a congregation and a group of people who follow Jesus isn't always so obvious to people on the outside, because all of us bring our own context, our own experiences, and kind of our own filters to these new relationships. And so whenever I'm outed as one of the pastors here at our church, I always get questions here in the city. One of them is, so what's a 360 church? And one of them is, why would you be in Berkeley? I mean, really. And a recent one that I've also got is, what exactly are you going to do here? I mean, Berkeley being Berkeley, the town for which there is no synonym, one of my friends says, and Cal being Cal, America's top-ranked public university. Exactly, what's the plan? I mean, what's the strategy? What's the program or the model that you're going to follow? That, and what they're implying is that how can anything really have any traction here? Because the whole point of living here is to be in a place where none of that possibly ever could have any traction. I mean, you live in a community where 85% of everybody says that their lifestyle is either good or excellent. There's just not enough misery here to leverage. You don't have power over people here because they're happier than you are, and they can even be smarter than you are most of the time. Well, usually people respond to this in two different ways in the church business. Congregations call it different things, but in a decade of traveling across the country, I've kind of seen two approaches that are answers to that question. One is what I would call power marketing. And this is the approach to church that says what we need to do is hire an expensive consultant who can identify demographic traits in our community. We then pick the widest times the most receptive demographic in the community. We develop a bullet list of the things that those people want, and we create clever web-based and hard copy products that pitch the church to people using the agenda that we've derived from our research out of their attitudes. And this can take the form of a website, a direct mail, or whatever. Nothing wrong with any of that kind of stuff. But the notion is that there is kind of a latent demand for what we offer, that if we could just tap, then we would be able to have higher attendance than we have today. Until you actually hit the street in Berkeley and you say things like, looking for a good church, and you get the simple one-word answer, no. The latent demand's just not there. Or people have all kinds of needs that they're not really in touch with. We understand them better than they understand themselves, and that's our edge, our advantage over them. And then we leverage that advantage into higher attendance. And that marketing takes as many forms as we can pay for, and generally it's only limited by the budget that's available for it. Now, I've seen this coast to coast, sea to shining sea. I have one particular instance in mind right now from a part of the country I'll just call another part of the country. This particular very large church believes that what people like in their community is rock and roll music. And their approach is essentially pitched to the de-churched. In other words, people who have been poisoned by toxic congregations and are adrift and need to be drawn back. That's a very important thing to do. Those churches are crucial to helping people sort of re-enter Christian community. This one does it very, very well, and I have great respect for it, but they're really sold on the whole rock and roll thing. So what that means is when you pull into the parking lot, I love this guy, this church, I think it's so great. There is secular rock and roll music, like maybe Queen's Greatest Hits album, or All in All, You're Just Another Brick in the Wall, some Pink Floyd, or some London-based urban folk or something like that, and it's pouring out of the speakers. And I asked my friend, I said, why do you use that particular music? He says, because it drives off the church people. It's a filter. So the only people that get through are the sort of de-church people who dig rock and roll music and are shocked to find that there's a church anywhere that understands that. And you come inside and the band does great sort of adult contemporary acoustic guitar driven light rock worship. And while they're doing this, they turn on the smoke generators. So the band is standing knee deep in smoke, like Bono on the 360 tour with U2, which was, by the way, named after our startup church. So all right, that's not strictly true, okay? And so the smoke is pouring out, and I'm sitting there, and of course it's in the context of what another friend of mine calls loud and dark, which means the ceiling is painted black, which we are not going to do here. And all the lights are down, and it's blinding Klieg lights, TV-style production lights on the stage, which when I spoke there, I couldn't see anybody. And it is a rock concert atmosphere because the research says this is what de-churched people are into. The Saturday night that I'm there, they can't get the smoke machine to shut off. And so it's just pouring out. Like, the pastor is a friend of mine, and he's a terrific guy. He just gets up and he's doing the announcements, and the smoke's like whoosh. Like this. I thought, see, the marketing thing is trickier than you think, because once you get people there based on the quality of the performance values, you better perform. I think in its darkest incarnations, the problem with power marketing is that it reduces people to objects, or segments of market share, or bulleted lists of traits. And it focuses essentially on building attendance as the core of what the church's mission is. Now, on the better side of it, it raises people's awareness of the fact that you exist in the city, and that's a good thing, and we intend to do it that way. But it very easily drifts into objectifying humans to build market share versus other competing entities who are trying to do the same thing. The other way I've seen people go at this is not just power marketing, but what I would call the parallel universe approach to church. You remember in comic books you've seen when you were much younger, or maybe they're online now, I don't really know, but there would be a major superhero like a Green Lantern or a Superman, and there would be another version of him or her, but in another universe, who would visit, and this one would show up and he would have like 3 arms instead of 2. This would be Bizarro Green Lantern, or he would be Blue Lantern. He'd have a blue ring, and it wouldn't be Ryan Reynolds. It would be one of those other good-looking guys. I don't know, but they would all be different, but the same, but separated by this dimensional barrier that kept the 2 universes apart, which is ironically exactly how a lot of physicists today are explaining everything else that nothing else explains. Oh, it's in another universe. Don't worry about it. You know, we have no theory to account for this data, so something must be happening in another universe or another dimension that accounts for it. It's all good. They got it from comic books. Come on. If I can explain this, it is not really science, okay? Churches have kind of taken a page out of Superman when they do things like saying, well, if an entity exists in our city, what we need to do is create the Christian knockoff of the entity. Like the Mister, want to buy a watch? It's a Rolex, $29.95 for you today on our sidewalk special. And so, if the community has an amusement park, we create the Holy Roller Coaster. If the community has a preschool, we create the Lion's Den Kindergarten. If the community is into guns, as our last community was in that other part of the country, I once visited a church which was advertising its weapon-based small groups with tables out in the lobby covered with various kinds of weapons, which you could join, and then you could go shooting and I don't know, possibly committing major crimes, but whatever is involved with weapons, you would be able to participate in by being part of this particular group. And no matter what the community has, it's never quite good enough for us, so what we're going to do is invent the Jesus version of that And we'll pull people into that, and that's how we'll keep them all occupied. This is the kingdom of God. It's the Jesus knockoff of whatever the world is already doing better. So if the community has a health club, we'll create the Jesus Stairmaster room, where we can all come and raise our heart rates and lower our cholesterol, but in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior. And so by so doing, what we'll do is provide people who love Jesus or people who might follow Jesus with the same kinds of benefits that secular entities provide, but we'll do it for them in a nice, safe way where we'll guarantee them that they'll never have to come into contact with someone who might need to know Jesus as the point of everything. And so we've got the ability, if we want to make our own little world. And within that world, to shelter people from anything that might cross their path from this other world that we're not so sure about. While power marketing tends to reduce people to objects, the parallel universe tends to reduce people to outsiders. There are those of us who are running the treadmill for Jesus, and there are those of us who are running the treadmill for the other team. And those two types of people have to be kept apart. In the power marketing theory, we bring people into large events and we build attendance. In the parallel universe theory, we make sure that the outsiders never really get in among us because they're really kind of like zombies. And if you get just even one drop of their blood on you, before you know it, you're moaning and shuffling too, with the hunger for human flesh. Then we have to get a shotgun and put 2 in your head. Or words to that effect. There's a passage in the book of John, which is one of the short accounts of the life of Jesus that we call Gospels in the Christian scriptures, and it puts Jesus and his followers and the world all on the same page, all in relationship to each other. It's in the part of John we call chapter 10, and Jesus is speaking here, and he describes himself and those that would ultimately make up the church and the world in which they live in these words, beginning in verse number 1. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep." Now this makes total sense to the people who are hearing him in first century Palestine, because they would have a daily experience of seeing sheep and shepherds for a variety of reasons, from food to clothing to religious reasons to sacrifice. So talking about sheep to them is like talking about ATMs or the Toyota Prius to us today. It's just that common. And so you can almost see people sitting there going, well, yeah, I sort of never really looked at it that way, but every time I walked a sheep and a shepherd going by, really that was kind of God trying to open my eyes about how my friendship with Jesus was going to work one day. So he goes on in verse 3, "To him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice," speaking of the good shepherd here, "and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers." This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was trying to say to them. All right, I get the sheep part, but we all know this. I mean, we all know that shepherds take care of the sheep. We all know that there's only one way into the sheepfold. You're sort of describing what we all see every day of our lives. What's kind of the point of this? And so speaking to people who are perplexed, he says this, "So Jesus again said to them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture.'" Out What's up with that? Out? That's what I think is verse 4 says the same thing. He leads them out. He's not supposed to lead them out. There's no out in this equation. The whole point is to get people where? In. So the power marketing theory says that what we need to do is attract people, bring them to a place, and then once they're there, this is what the church growth theorists use this phrase, we close the back door. Does not sound wonderful? In other words, we create the Jesus penitentiary. We bring you, we close the back door, then we never let you get away. And what bonds you to us is an endless computer-generated series of birthday and anniversary cards. It just makes me warm all over to think of that kind of relationship with an organization. They remembered my birthday. So does the American Association of Retired People, for crying out loud. And so this concept of out, this has no place in our church thinking. It's supposed to be to get people in, because attendance isn't blossoming. I mean, aren't we like a business? Isn't that our bottom line? If we just push it up and up and up and up and up, I mean, aren't those the people who are on magazine covers and who are in the really big pictures among the talking heads at conferences and so forth? Isn't it about bringing them in, bringing them in, bringing them in, bringing them in, and then slam that back door? Back up! You can't leave! It's funny, until this week, we've all been reading a chapter a day of the book of John. I had always read this that way. Jesus, you're so good. You bring us into the sheepfold. And then today, dang, the Bible, it drives me crazy. Today, or a couple of days ago, I read this and I thought, I've had this backwards my whole life. This isn't about in, this is about out. The pasture that the shepherd is leading the sheep to isn't in the sheepfold, it's in the world. He takes the sheep to the world to feed them. Can you imagine what the grass is like in the sheepfold? Ooh, let's not go there. Nasty. Nasty. But out in the world, there's every blade of grass God ever created to draw on. There's sunlight, there's air. Now we need the sheepfold too, because we need protection, we need closeness. We need to, those times when we're there with the shepherd, there are things that can be done there, like when a sheep is wounded or needs healing or is sick or is down for a while, that probably the pasture out there is maybe not the best place for. But when I read this, what I read is the shepherd who knows that this is a two-way street, that he brings people in to lead them out. The parallel universe says, you get the gatekeeper, he closes the door, he bolts it shut, he puts the concertina wire and guard towers with spotlights around the top of the wall, and we stick the treadmills back in the corner so we can call it the 360 Church Health Club. Because those people out there, that's zombie land, baby. Why is rule 1 cardio? Because you've got to run from them. They're bad people. The only place you're safe, in here with me. But when Jesus describes it himself, it's the total opposite. Do you want to feed? Do you want to grow? Do you want to stretch? Do you want to be engaged? Do you want to change things? I'm headed out there. Why don't you come with me? And so while we will raise awareness, and while we do have a website, I love handing people our business card, showing them this side first, which is just the QR code. You turn it over and do this and say, it's all on there. That's our pitch. We're never going to create a walled sheepfold with the concertina wire on top. If Berkeley has a blood bank, we're not going to create 360 needles. If Berkeley has a food program, we're not going to create 360 homeless. If Berkeley has a great nonprofit that serves people in a certain way, we're not going to create the Jesus version of sane. we're going to empower our people to be what Jesus called salt and light and sow them into the great things that are already in this community. The Lord will give us our own unique stuff as we go along, but that's to fill voids that aren't here. Like our town could really use a great comedy club. I'm telling you what, this place is way too serious in my book. I think we're the only city in America of 100,000 that doesn't have a single comedy club. I mean, that's where I'm coming from here. Now, I know that doesn't sound like the most spiritual thing in the world, but the principle is we'll look for the voids and try to fill those. But where there's great stuff there, let's be a little bit of seasoning. Let's bring light to things that are already very effective and be part of this great city. And through the way we live among people who are involved in those initiatives, we can live our witness in front of people there in ways that we'll never be able to do in any other form with this natural, organic kind of a concept. This morning at 6:15, I got an email from a very large city in Asia, from a friend of mine who has the job of bringing the good news about Jesus' death and resurrection to that nation. He lives in the capital city. He spent 25 years there in the slums. He's one of the smartest people I know. His name is Alan, and I recently invited him into a class I taught by way of a grainy Skype picture from this large city. And afterwards, he wrote me a reflection about some of the comments he shared with the class and what his own life has been like there in this enormous metropolis. It says this: Dear Earl, I appreciate you passing that information on. I really appreciated the chance to participate with you for that hour. He's referring to the class. Working in a place where the Christian faith has grown so slowly and churches are small has really made me sensitive to the feelings of the small church average pastor. Out here, you can't fool yourself as easily into thinking that working harder or jumping on the latest technique is going to produce results. These things come from God. I have found it incredibly liberating to de-link results from one's service as a pastor so you can express the abundant life of Christ to others and really enjoy the people that one shepherds. They are not projects on the way to higher numbers. I've been talking along these lines with pastors I work with here, and then he names the country, and just popped into my head to share that when you asked me if I had any last comments. What are we going to do in Berkeley? We're going to follow the Good Shepherd out into the world, and we're going to do what he directs us to do. We have probably a couple of clues about what that'll look like. That's exciting. Probably some more areas where there are no clues yet, but there will be. Just a question of time. We follow Jesus out. The following Jesus in part will never be a problem, but I'm not so sure it works the other way around. He knows where we need to go, what we need to do, and we will obey his voice in our city and do the things that he shows us to do. If we take care of that, growing our church will never be a problem. We're going to pause for a moment now and ask our band to come back and lead us in a little more worship. Take a couple of minutes at this point to do two things. One is if you'd like to have anybody pray with you this morning about an issue or someone that you care about or a situation that's close to your heart. While we're singing, some of our leaders will be available in the back, and they'll be glad to pray with you this morning in a tactful way that you'll be comfortable with. The other thing we do now is just take a couple of minutes to just think about this a little bit and pray about it and meditate on it. And perhaps the question today is, where's the Good Shepherd sending me? Some of us may be here in need of kind of coming in a little closer. And maybe depending on the week, there are others that Jesus is sending out. He's sending you to a certain person or an organization or an entity or an experience of some kind. But I bet every one of us is headed one way or the other today. And maybe next week it'll all be reversed. But for right now, let the Spirit of God just speak to your heart a little bit about what that direction is for you. And then when we're finished with our worship time, we'll invite you to come and receive the elements and we'll take communion.